Alright, welcome back to part 2 of the Wednesday's lesson for Algebra 2. This is back in your packet. So what we did to solve each rational equation algebraically. First thing I want to do is just identify what x can't be, which it looks like x plus 3 cannot be equal to 0, and x plus 6 cannot be equal to 0. So it looks like x cannot be -3 and x cannot be -6. If that was the case, then that means this has no solution. But let's see if that's the case, okay? So first things first, we're going to go ahead and cross multiply. We're going to cross multiply x plus 1 times x plus 3 and 8 times x plus 6. If you need to pause, go ahead and work that out before I show you. Pause now. Alright, unpause, and that would be x squared plus 4x plus 3, and that would be 8x plus 48. What we're going to do to continue to solve this is we're going to move that 8x right here over to the other side by doing the opposite, which is to subtract 8x. And I'm left with 48 now on this side, and x squared minus 4x plus 3. Again, we're going to go ahead and move that positive 48 by doing the opposite. What's the opposite of a positive 48? Negative 48, and that would be x squared minus 4x minus 45. Now I do ask students to factor. Take some time, factor this out. You know how to do that. Alright, factor. And if you factor, that would be x minus 9 and x minus 5. Actually, that would be x plus 5, wouldn't it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. And if we work that out, that would be x minus 9 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. That means my solution is either x equals 9 or x can be -5. And since none of these are excluded values, these are my solutions. Alright, so moving right along. Back to the worksheet, I did want students to go over how to find the least common factor when it looks like, if I had like in the worksheet x over 1 and 3 over x, my denominators, there's nothing in common there, right? I have an x, I have 1, there doesn't seem to be anything in common. My least common factor would then be what they don't have in common, which is that 1. And what they don't have in common, which is that x. So that'd be about 1x, which as you can see here in the worksheet, it's already done for you. So on this next one, where my denominator is x minus 6 and 4, there doesn't seem to be much in common there. So our least common factor would just be the 4 times x minus 6. So when there's nothing really in common, we're just writing the denominators kind of just side by side to find my least common factor. We did a couple of these before moving on to the packet. So here I asked students to find the least common factor for x minus 3 and 5. And even though this is a whole number, I'm going to write a 1 underneath it, between 1 and x plus 5. So I had them do that, and as they saw, that my least common factor was just going to be those two factors side by side. Just like for this one, my least common denominator factor would be x times x plus 5. And this was very helpful when we did this problem here. So in your worksheet, I do provide a little bit of a graphic organizer to help you through this, solving a real-world problem with rational equations. So let's say, I'm going to kind of put some stuff in highlight here. So let's say I had Kevin can clean a large aquarium tank in about 7 hours. So that's how long Kevin can do that. Whereas if both of them work together, Kevin and Laura, they both work together, they could probably clean the tank in about 4 hours. And it says write and solve an equation, a rational equation, all right, where to determine how long to the nearest tenth it would take just Lara to clean the tank by herself. Okay, so now with all that in mind, we're going to go ahead and fill some stuff out, like Kevin's rate. So Kevin can do this, clean the tank in about 7 hours. Lara by herself, we don't know, so we're going to use a letter. Let's use T for time, why not, right? And the number of hours it takes them to work together to do this job was about 4 hours to clean the tank. Alright, let's continue right along. So Kevin's was 7, and if they work together, it's about 4 hours. Alright, Lara's rate is T, which we don't know, and 4 hours if they work together. Alright, so now we have our equation. You'll notice here it asks us to find the excluded value, which our denominator on that last one was T. So we're going to see if, well, so essentially T can't be 0. I mean, it makes sense because she has to take some time to do something. It can't just happen like, you know, automatically. So I'm going to write down my problem from the last page. And T and 4. And you notice I left LCD blank. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my denominator here and my denominator there. Both are very different, right? None of them are the same. I don't see anything in common. So that would be 7 and T. So that means my least common denominator would be 7T. Alright. Now what I'm going to do is see what kind of cancels out on the numerator and denominator sides. I'm going to write that over 1. So I can see here the 7's kind of cancel out. So I'm left with 4T. The T's kind of cancel out, so I'm left with 4 times 7, which is 28. And 1 time, well, the 1's kind of cancel out, so I'm left with 7T. Right? Also, if I didn't want to cancel out, you know, 1 times 7 is 7. Even if I divided by 1, still 7, right? So let's go ahead and now we simplified. Now we're going to solve for T. What's the opposite of a positive 4T? Negative 4T. And if I subtract those, I'm left with 28 equals 3T. What's the opposite of multiplying by 3? Dividing. Cool. So T equals about 9.3 forever, so that's about 9 hours. And since there's 60 minutes times about 0.3 forever, if I did that, that would be about 18 minutes. I also would have taken 20 minutes because a lot of students know that that 0.3 forever is actually 1/3. So if I multiplied 60 times 1/3, that would be about 20 minutes. So either one's fine. I would take either. And as I'm looking at the timer, it looks like I'm out of time for this part of the video. So we'll continue on with 9.3, number 8, as well as the homework that we did for that class. Stay tuned for the next video.